5 years ago, I would not have believed that I could be here talking to you like this. I can hear the clock in the background. I hope you can hear it too. That clock tells you that I'm in Donegal. This is the room where I have the 3 clocks. I can't look at any wall or in any direction without knowing the time. It's a lovely small room. I suppose that affects the recording quality as well. But what I like about it is I have a writing desk. It's a writing desk. It's a Georgian writing desk. It could be 200 years old. It's one of those, do you know those things that look like a piano or a small harmonium? And they have a lid on them and it's inlaid. There's a kind of a design of a shell, a seashell, in the middle of it in a circle. And it's very, very beautiful. And that's all hand work done 200 years ago. And then you open the lid, you open it by kind of pulling it towards you. And when you pull it towards you, you have to be very, very careful that you pull out the side supports before you open it, because they support it and give you like a desk. And now I have a desk, and in front of me there's, to the left and right, drawers, 2 big wide drawers at the top, underneath them 4 more drawers, and then underneath them pigeonholes, those little kind of cubby holes that where you can put envelopes or pens or little hard drives or whatever you want yourself. It's just such a little world at these desks. I'm fierce fond of it, and I'm fond of it because I got it, I didn't pay an awful lot of money for it. I have always found that if you buy an antique, if you buy a good antique, you'll pay less for it than you would if you went up to some fancy shop and bought the modern version of whatever it is, a writing desk or a table. And I also feel that when I buy something that's old and ancient, I'm not damaging the trees, because there's an awful lot of trees get cut down all over the world to make the furniture that we buy when we're recycling furniture, and we think, oh, I'd like a nice new bookcase. And you think that's a neutral act, and you realise it's not really. You're wasting more trees. So the great thing about vintage furniture, antique furniture, is, well, firstly, I don't think it's as expensive as the new item. I have bought big wardrobes in me time, modern ones, for 1,300, 1,500 euros, and everybody thinks, well, it's a big fit-in wardrobe, sure, that's a good price for it. And then I've gone along and bought a huge wardrobe, an antique wardrobe that came from Limavady. Beautiful, dark wood, engraved and handmade. Bought it for like 700 euros, half the price. And I know what desks cost nowadays, and this one cost me about 500 or 600. So I'm fierce fond of antiques, and I'm fierce fond of this Georgian writing bureau. And I sit here, and I put me, like, I have obviously the stuff in front of me. I have the microphone, and then I have my computer, and then if I have a few notes, it's all on the desk. And I have a book by Rumi. Coleman Barks is the great name. He translates Rumi, and if you're ever looking for a book by Rumi and it's translated by Coleman Barks, I think you're in safe hands. And this is Songs of the Soul Meeting. Songs of the Soul Meeting by Rumi. I could open any page at random and you'd love it, Entering the Shell. This one is called Entering the Shell. I'll read it for you. Love is alive. Love is alive. And someone borne along by it is more alive than lions roaring or men in their fierce courage. Bandits ambush others on the road. They get wealth, but they stay in one place. Lovers keep moving, never the same, not for a second. What makes others grieve, they enjoy. When they look angry, don't believe their faces. It's spring lightning, a joke before the rain. They chew thorns thoughtfully along with pasture grass. Gazelle and lioness having dinner. Love is invisible except here in us. Sometimes I praise love, sometimes love praises me. Love. A little shell somewhere on the ocean floor opens its mouth. You and I are we, those imaginary beings, enter that shell as a single sip of water. Love is invisible except here in us. Sometimes I praise love, sometimes love praises me. Love, a little shell, somewhere on the ocean floor, opens its mouth. You and we, those imaginary beings, enter that shell as a single sip of seawater. Now there's one mad poem. God Almighty. I'll come back to that, I'd say, later. I was going to talk today, you know, sometimes I struggle with what I'll say because I have anxieties. I feel anxious sharing so intimately with people who are out there. And that's why I have to tell myself that we have a good relationship and there's a real you who is present. And I like to think of you present in the room. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to share. I wouldn't have the confidence to share it, sitting here on my own. I'd be worried, like, who's out there that might, like, interpret me in the wrong way. For example, when I talk about religion, I'm terrified sometimes that people get the wrong impression. You know, that I'm a kind of a seriously religious, devout person. And you might say, well, you know, Michael, like, you've been at it for 40 years. You were ordained a priest. You were studying Buddhism. Of course you're serious about religion. But the one thing I learned about religion was religion frees you from religion. That's the journey. That's the journey. If you don't go in there, you'll never be free of it. That's what I think. But it's so full of paradoxes for us in our time. I mean, for example, today is an Orthodox feast. It's a feast in the Orthodox tradition, right? Russian Orthodox. Big feast today. It's the feast of the ascension of the Lord Jesus into heaven. Okay, that's a big one. 40 days after what they celebrate Easter, they have this thing of, you know, Jesus ascending into heaven, and it's very much easy to ridicule it because it's beam me up, Scotty. You know, there they are, top of a hill, half a dozen of his followers and himself, and he kind of goes up on a cloud. Now, in actual fact, what the texts say is that he disappeared into a cloud. And there's a fair argument to say that underneath the literal meaning, underneath the literal story, there is a deep truth, a deep sense that the immediacy of presence begins to fade and disappear in time. Do you ever notice it happens with a photograph? Do you ever notice that if you don't have a photograph of somebody and you say goodbye to them at the airport, and you're looking at their face and their nose and their little freckles and their lips and the hair coming down on either side of their ears, and you think, this is my daughter, this is my son, and you just are there with them, right? And then they go through the boarding gate and you see them zigzagging and then doing their bags through the security check, and then they're gone. A last wave in the distance, and they're gone, and you have to drive home. And for days, you can still almost smell the fragrance of their shampoo For days you can still see the colour of their eyes, the expression on their face, and their little freckles, and their little sad, lonely, quivering lips as they head off to another country. That's the reality of losing people to emigration. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, they're still there. And they're always there. And when they phone, they're there. But you know what happens in the days when there's no internet, in the days when there's no FaceTime, in the days when there's no Skype? When we didn't have all those things and somebody went away, it was harder and harder to remember what they looked like after 6 months. And I remember when I was young, and in those days people would come back from America. Especially I remember it when I lived in Glengavlin. A few years I was there, and the summer would come and people would return from America, and you'd see them walking into the kitchen to their loved ones, to their cousins or brothers or sisters, and there'd be that sense of looking at them all evening. Let me look at you. Because they had forgotten what they looked like. Gradually, the intimacy of somebody's presence, which lingers after they're gone for a while, but that gradually goes. And I like to think that when Jesus was crucified and died, there was a deep insight that particularly Mary Magdalene was the one, and other women. They had an insight that his presence was still with them. His presence was still with them. And what did that presence mean? Because that presence is the same as when I feel you're present, or when we feel our loved ones are present. It's a deep awakening of our own being in the here and now. We experience ourselves as alive in the here and now by simple virtue of the fact that we experience somebody else. We come awake in this moment of somebody's presence. And if you can see Jesus as a great wisdom teacher, a teacher in the tradition of wisdom teachers, Jewish tradition, right up then in Islam to people like Rumi, this was a tradition of people trying to speak wisdom. And if you see Jesus as such, and if you see that what he was saying to people was, the kingdom of heaven is now, a time will come when we will celebrate and worship in our hearts. We are present now to each other. We are here now. We are in heaven now. So that is the real energy of his presence. And the insight, I think, for Mary Magdalene and other women, when they found the tomb empty, was no. He's not here in the tomb. He was never here in the tomb. It's the presence. It is the presence that was in him that is still here in me. And then you got this big realization of presence, awakening. And I think that was a pivotal moment in human history. I think it was a unique revelation by God, if you want to use that terminology. The sense of what is present in Jesus is present even more deeply as he is lifted up on the cross. Even more deeply, this presence. What is this presence? How can we name it? But we can experience it. We can feel it. And that presence is real, because it's a presence fully inhabiting your own self, awakening yourself. You are being here now, in that presence. Let's suppose that Jesus was unique. Let's suppose that he was. And that's not an unusual thing to say. I mean, loads of people are unique. You know, Picasso was unique. There are loads of people that, when you come into their presence, their energy and presence is greater than anything you've ever met before. So let's suppose it's not a big deal to think of Jesus as such. Let's suppose he had that powerfully unique presence, and Let's suppose that there was a powerful insight of awakening, like enlightenment in Buddhist terms, that began to pervade firstly Mary Magdalene and other women, and then gradually they tried to share this with the apostles, the followers. He is with us, he is here. And let's suppose that got formulated into various narratives to try and, people were trying to share their experience, some of them in Jerusalem. 70 miles away in Galilee, the boys had gone off fishing 2 or 3 days later, and they were getting experiences as well. And they were saying, no, I think he was present to me now when I was in the fishing boat. And so these narratives begin to evolve. The stories of Jesus being with them. But this unique sense of his presence based on that he, Jesus in the flesh, was actually with them breaking bread and drinking wine very recently, and then he's gone. So we see we have this presence, but then gradually there has to be a time where you sense, I don't feel that presence as strong. I don't feel his presence as strong. How would you say that? He's disappeared. But he's disappeared into the clouds. He's disappeared into heaven. Because he brought heaven so much to us, he awakened heaven in us so powerfully that of course he's gone back to heaven. Meister Eckhart once said that you need to go beyond God to find God. He said, if I had to choose between God and the truth, I would choose the truth. So the act of faith is faith. It's not knowing. The unnameability of faith. That if you take something like the ascension of Jesus into heaven, and this is a feast day, 40 days after Easter, you say he went away. Well, he didn't go away up into the stars in that sense, even though that's the literal narrative. But, the phrase that he disappeared into the clouds, he went away from us, he went back to heaven. That's a literal narrative that sits very comfortably with a deep understanding of the soul or the unconscious, a deep understanding that presence as we experience it, as we awaken, is not just Buddhist, but it is the otherness or the transcendence of all that is. All being is within us, being us. All being is within us, being me. All being. Now there's a relationship that I find more comforting than my relationship with my mother. May the light of heaven shine on her. But that all being is being in me, being me, allows me to be free as me, and to know that being free as me is God being free within me. That's very comforting. And where do I experience any of this except in the beloved, except in the one who loves me or who I love? And of course in the dynamic of Jesus at the time with Mary Magdalene and with the people who were around him. This was a community of love. And it's not unusual if you think about all the great souls in the world that have lived, the Gandhis, the Dalai Lamas, and other private, not famous, but holy people, that you come into their presence and you know that they love you nearly. You just stand in front of them like a great wise old teacher or a lovely old person who has found wisdom in their life, and you come into their presence and you realize you can feel love from them. And the fact that somebody loves you awakens you. And the fact that you love somebody else awakens them. And the fact that somebody loves you awakens you. And the fact that you love somebody else awakens them. We awaken this love. We wake in the beloved, and the beloved is the next person we meet, if we're capable. Love is alive, and someone born along by it is more alive than lions roaring, or men in their fierce courage. Bandits ambush others on the road. They get wealth, but they stay in one place. Lovers keep moving, never the same, not for a second. What makes others grieve, they enjoy. When they look angry, don't believe their faces. It's spring lightning, a joke before the rain. They chew thorns thoughtfully, along with pasture grass. Gazelle and lioness having dinner. Love is invisible except here in us. Sometimes I praise love, sometimes love praises me. Love. A little shell somewhere on the ocean floor opens its mouth. You and I are we. Those imaginary beings entered that shell as a single sip of seawater. This love that he's just talked about is like it can't be seen, it can't be identified except in us, except in how I relate to you and you relate to me. And then I praise love, and then sometimes love praises me. It's like not me that's praising love, but love itself is praising in me. He is lifted up. He is lifted up into the clouds and disappears. He is lifted up and into the clouds and he disappears. When Jesus said, look not among the dead, but among the living. When Jesus said, heaven and the kingdom is here and it's now, and you'll find it among the poor and the detached. All the wisdom of Jesus in the stories, they're still extraordinary and healing and beautiful. And I feel, for me, certainly those stories open the lid, just burst the thing open inside me and awaken me. On a morning in Donegal, when I'm just reflecting about that Orthodox feast, the Ascension of Jesus into heaven, it leaves me with a sense that heaven is all about me. When I am awake, when I am aware, be it light or dark, I am always in heaven. When I recognize the presence, I am in heaven. I'm looking into heaven. When I meet you, when we sit down and communicate, we are as one single drop of seawater in the great shell of love. I didn't expect to be doing these things in a podcast, but that's the adventure of being a storyteller. This is the way it's going, and I'm so happy with that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.